נתחיל, קודם כל אנחנו מאוד שמחים שהגעתם. אני ערן יוהן, אני שותף פה ב-PwC ישראל, ראש המגזר של בידור ומדיה, שהעולם הזה של כל ה-Gamification שייך אליו. הנושא הזה, אני חייב להגיד, מרתק. רבים מהלקוחות שלנו ברחבי העולם, לאחרונה אנחנו פרסמנו כמה פוסטים בקבוצת הלינקדאין שלנו מכל מיני מקומות בעולם שמאוד מאוד מתקדמים בנושא, בין אם זה אוסטרליה, ארצות הברית, ואנחנו מזמינים אתכם, מי שהספיק שם את ה-Q-Code לסרוק, להצטרף ולקרוא אותם. בנוסף לזה, בימים הקרובים אנחנו נשיק את המגזין שלנו, מגזין שזה תחזית 5-שנתית של עולם הבידור והמדיה פה בישראל. הוא עוסק בכל מיני נושאים והתפתחויות בתחום. יש כמה הרחבות בתחום של טלוויזיה, אינטרנט ועיתונות, למי שאני מניח כולכם זה בוודאי ירתק. גם את זה אנחנו נפיץ לכל מי שנתן את הפרטים, וגם בקבוצת הלינקדאין, כך שאני מאוד מציע לכם להצטרף. מאוד דברים שהם מאוד מעניינים קורים שם. מעבר לזה, צרו איתנו קשר, אנחנו נשמח לשמוע מכם, לשמוע תגובות גם על המגזין ובכל נושא שהוא. מעבר לזה, Gabe, floor is yours.
Awesome. Okay, everybody, ברוכים הבאים, תודה רבה שבאתם ל-gsummitX הזה בתל אביב. עשינו כבר 9 או 10 gsummitX בכל העולם, אבל זה ממש אחר לי לעשות את זה פה בתל אביב. בגלל, יש 100 אנשים שבאו הלילה, it's amazing. It's amazing. Because no matter how many times I do it, no matter where I do it, or in what languages I do a brief but slightly rocky introduction to the event, it's always a part of what makes this whole experience rewarding and interesting to me has been the fact that as we've gone around the world and we've said, oh, let's talk about gamification here or there, people have been like, you know, put their hands up and been like, oh my God, this is awesome, I need this, I want this, I've been doing this, whatever. And particularly here in Tel Aviv, we're very fortunate to have, at this moment, a group of people, with the exception of me, Israeli companies, Israeli thought leaders, who are all doing something interesting with gamification. So we didn't necessarily have to import all of the experts that are coming today for the session. So we have really an extraordinary bunch of speakers to share with you tonight. It's going to be super fun. It's going to be fast. It's going to be interesting. We've got 20 minutes per speaker. Bam, bam, bam. A little break. Bam, bam. It's going to be so fun. And at the end of the night, your brains will be bursting with ideas and thoughts, and also anger and frustration, which hopefully will help you release. Okay, so I want to start off by introducing Doron Nir. Here, Doron Nir. Say it any way you want. Either way, it could possibly be his name. But so Doron, for those of you who don't know, Doron is one of Israel's best-known game designers. And as you know, gamification is not only about game design, but it borrows a lot from game design. And so Doron has done, you know, lots of interesting thinking, lots of interesting talking about gamification, and I want to ask him to come and start off tonight by giving you sort of his perspective on gamification and its application to brands and those game design things. So Doron, hey, come join us. So you can clip this anywhere on your body. It's a little microphone thing. Sure, perfect. And you just swipe and the slides will move forward.
Okay, hi everyone. So my name is Doron Nir. I guess I'm really not as famous as Gabe said. I've been working on games and doing game design for almost 15 years now. I started my first... Excuse me?
There's no actual microphone.
Oh, this is only for recording?
It's just for recording. We don't have
no amplification, sorry. If you don't hear me, just let me know and I'll shout, okay? Shout? Okay, I'll shout. So I've been involved in one way or another in the Israeli gaming industry for a little more than 15 years. There wasn't much of an industry when I started after the army, and my first job in the gaming industry was to write about games that came from abroad. I built a website and managed it for several years. It's called V-Games, maybe some of you know it. In the past years, since now there is a gaming industry and there are investments in the field, I've been involved with several game companies, Fantactics and Go2Go and Double Duck, and I'm consulting to several others like Come to Play. I'm also teaching game design at the Beit Burl game design program, which is the oldest in Israel, more than 7 years. And this year I'm starting to teach at the Mikhlala Leminhal. So that's it about me. Also, one disclaimer, I'm a little bit sick and a little bit clogged, and I took something that's called gsummitX. So there is a very slight chance I'm going to pass out in the middle of the presentation. If I do, I have somebody here to back me up, Idotal. And after he's done, please call an ambulance and tell them I took gsummitX. So we're going to talk about storytelling. And for me, at least, the part that started making games really interesting for me was the point where they started adding stories. I grew up, I was a very young boy in the 70s, and the first time I saw Pong, being the first interactive experience that I saw on a TV screen, my head exploded for a little bit. Then I ran home and asked my parents to buy it. Then I cried for 3 days when they said no. And this went on because games were not perceived as a respectable thing for parents to buy their kids, because you don't learn anything from it. But when computers, personal computers started to come out, then it was okay, because you would learn English and you would learn programming, and that is more respectable in the eyes of my parents. So I got a ZX Spectrum. How many of you know what that is even? That's great. You are all my family. I had a ZX Spectrum back in the early 80s, and I bought these really thick books that I wrote games on. Using them, basically you had to, type everything and then hope to God that there's no bugs in it, and you would compile it and it would run. And this went on, and the first time I think I experienced a story was with a game called King's Quest, which was really what you call an adventure game, and it was slightly graphic. I mean, there were literally like 7 pixels that represented a king and 5 pixels that represented a monster, and they would fight, and this was like a whole new, level of imagination. I was there. I was literally playing that. And when storytelling came into games, for me it was a very meaningful moment. However, when it comes to brands and advertising, I think brands and advertising have been utilizing storytelling much, much earlier. And this is really one of the very early examples that I found for a brand that uses narrative. The Marlboro Man, or the campaign known as Marlboro Country, it started in 1955. A very famous guy from the advertising business, which I don't remember right now, had the idea of having this character, this hero, that would represent all the values that Marlboro stands for. And this was the Marlboro Man. It was a cowboy that talked about the struggles of being a cowboy, the loneliness and traveling in the prairie and working with herds and whatever it was. And at the end of the day, all of these commercials ended with this cowboy sitting next to the fire, smoking a Marlboro and enjoying a moment of peace and quiet. And this was a metaphor for men everywhere. Men really connected to that. The success of the Marlboro Man campaign was huge. We're talking about 300% growth for Marlboro cigarettes in the first 2 years of this campaign running. And it ran for several years, probably around 40 years. I think the last time the Marlboro Man was used was in the 90s, or maybe I don't know when they're still using it. In a very interesting twist, a modern day version of the Marlboro Man is the Old Spice guy. Somebody that probably, how many of you have seen this commercial? How many of you have seen it and don't admit it by raising your hand? I don't think, really? You don't admit it? Okay. I don't think there's a single person who hasn't seen at least one of those. And this is really amazing because it does something wonderful. It makes fun of everything that the Marlboro Man stands for. It's not serious. It's completely off the chart. You know, he's in a shower, and then he's on a boat, and then he's on a horse, and he talks about the jewels that he's going to bring that girl, and he has tickets to that show. It's like completely ridiculous, but at the same time, it's very convincing. It's funny. It's compassionate. You like this guy. All the girls want this guy to be the man that they don't have, and all the guys want to be the man that this man is. So
Unfortunately, it didn't help the sales.
it didn't help the sales?
No,
Really?
That's the report that I said. Unfortunately.
You wanted to say something? I can't hear. I'm sorry. It helped Old Spice sales.
But
Yeah,
listen,
there's a disagreement,
but I love disagreements, and I love disagreeable Israelis. But we're going to have all kinds of time to talk about the presentations afterwards at a break. So write things down when they come to you in your head. Okay.
This is a whoosh moment, and this narrative is a very powerful example of how things are done in modern days. If you want to create a hero, of course it's going to be a little bit ridiculous if you create it as a very strong masculine guy. I mean, we know the reality of it is different, but still, I love this idea. So I'm going to put this whole thing about narratives in advertising and brand narratives and all the stories. I'm going to put it on the side, and I'm going to start talking about game design, which is really why we're here. And what you're going to see now is the first slide that I show students when I teach them game design. This is the very, very basic of what interactive games are, and by interactive I mean digital and not necessarily. You know what? It's not just digital. It's all games. So the first thing is mechanics. Mechanics are the actions that users do when they play the game. Players do when they play the game. Mechanics could be anything from running from point A to point B to making this motion on a touch screen, to touching a controller, to jumping in front of a screen where there's a Kinect camera. The mechanics are the actions that we do in the physical world, and these mechanics are translated through the game to a metaphor. The metaphor is probably the most important thing in the game, because without the metaphor, we have nothing. Even Pong, which is really the very, very basic form of interactive game, has a metaphor. It's the metaphor of ping pong. And you're communicated with this metaphor by the name of the game. It's called Pong. You have two bars on the side, and there's something that is a single pixel, but really is a metaphor for a ball, and it goes from one side to the other, and you're supposed to stop it, just like in ping pong. I'm willing to bet, and I don't know that for sure, but I'm willing to bet that they had the mechanic before they had the metaphor, before they knew they were going to call it Pong. I mean, they didn't think about, okay, so what can we do with like 6 pixels and a controller that spins like that? I think they did it, and they thought, okay, this is something interactive, it's fun, and then they realized, okay, we have ping pong. So this is really the basic of game design, and the thing that wraps all of it is progress. If you have mechanics that are translated into a metaphor, and you have progress, progress curves, then you have a game. If you do it across multiple layers of what we call gameplay, mechanics and metaphor coming together, then you have something which is a more elaborate game, and we call this general progress, we call it the metagame, basically. It's something that extends beyond the just session of gameplay that you play right now. If you think about football, for example, then the game would be the soccer game, not football, soccer. Football is, yeah. The game would be actually the 90 minutes, 11 players on each side, playing with the ball, trying to score goals. The metagame would be the league. We live from Saturday to Saturday. We play, we exchange players. We don't know what the composition of the team is going to be. This is the metagame, and this makes everything about tracking teams and tracking careers of players and tracking the league so much more interesting. Now, I'm going to talk just very briefly about this wonderful game, Angry Birds. When Angry Birds, the idea for Angry Birds started, there was a game very similar to that called Castle Crushers, or Crush the Castle, sorry. And this game had a metaphor of a trebuchet Anybody knows what that is? It's basically a medieval catapult that swings a rock in this motion and then releases it and breaks a castle. And you would basically tap when you want to release the rock. The mechanics of the game was not pulling a slingshot, but it was when you release the rock. And that would translate to a rock flying on a castle, and it was exactly like Angry Birds, but it wasn't nearly as successful. And Angry Birds, with their idea of turning these rocks into what actually in Angry Birds are birds without wings that has different functionalities, they came up with a mechanic of pulling the slingshot and adjusting it so that you have more aim and make it a little more interesting and more strategic. And then they added various materials, which actually existed in the original game, but it wasn't the same materials, like wood and stone and ice. And the fusion between mechanic and metaphor was so powerful. I personally, on top of the fact that the game is in an amazing production value and characters are super beautiful, the fusion of this mechanic and metaphor came to what we know as Angry Birds, and probably one of the biggest successes in recent years. Now, how many of you know these badges? Okay, so these are a set of badges from Foursquare, one of the best-known examples of gamification, and I think what ushered the new age of gamification that we know right now and that we are part of it. And even Foursquare is not a game. I mean, it is a game, but it's not, it's not a game like gamers perceive it. If you ask a gamer if Foursquare is a game, he would look at you like, I mean, come on, get serious. But Foursquare has some very light metaphors associated with it. If you check into a place enough times, you become the mayor. They could have called it king. They could have called it Caesar or master or whatever, but they decided on mayor, which is an urban, casual, modern day metaphor, and their decision had a very big significance in their success. I mean, I don't necessarily think that as many players would have been connected to that if they would have called it Caesar or master of the universe of the deli on my street. But can you harness the power of gamification to brand narratives? Can you take something like the Marlboro Man and wrap it around a gamification system that would make your brand stronger and would make the engagement better? Well, the answer to that, I think, is yes. The first thing that you need is a hero. The hero always has to be the user. I mean, you can't create a game, especially if it's your brand, that you want users to engage with, if you don't have that hero, which is the user, that operates in the world of your gamification system or your game, without making him feel like this is important, this is something that will be rewarding for you, that's going to get social status for you. People publish to Facebook the fact that they became mayor in a specific area just because they want to show their friends. So there needs to be some form of heroism in it. And one of the things that I'm going to tell you, there is a tendency of grown-ups to make fun of or just treat not seriously the idea of you becoming a hero in anything. Because, it's like, it sounds like a little bit like a child's game, but this emotion of I'm the hero of this and this and this is a critical part of games. And it's a critical part of game design. And if you want to create a powerful, engaging gamification system, you have to find what is the thing that your users or customers want to be heroes in, and you have to engage with that. You have to speak to their wishes in that perspective. Once you do that, you need to create a set of actions. This set of actions need to be anything from casual tasks to physical tasks involving interaction with the application itself, and it has to translate to what we call progress. This is the equivalent for gamification of the slide I showed you before of mechanics and metaphor create a game plus progress. So we need to have all these three elements. And if you look at the application like the Nike running application the gamification actions of it include running and doing your daily task. And if you look at Foursquare, their tasks include checking into places and various combinations of checking into places at night, and checking into places in various locations, and checking into airports, and all this kind of stuff. I'm going to go now to what I consider to be the top 5 rules of gamification narratives. And this is a bit tricky, because when I prepared for this talk, I looked for really good examples of brands that did a gamification system that harnessed their brand narrative in a good way, and there are actually not as many. One of the best ones that you're going to hear about today is the one created by the guys in the IDF blog, and you should really stick around to hear that, because they did amazing work there. But the first thing is match your brand narrative. Matching your brand narrative it sounds a little obscure, but basically it means that if your narrative is talking about community and sharing, don't create a gamification system that is all about competition and stomping your partner. Okay? It's important to create competition, but there is a competition which is sociable and social, and there's a competition which is, like, really, I want to nail this guy head to head, I want to beat him, and I would advise against it if your brand is all about community. You need to be really careful about creating these metaphors, and on the other hand, please remember, it always has to be fun. So don't be afraid to take your brand and maybe give it properties that are not necessarily part of it just because you want to add a little bit of game fun to it. The users of gamification and the people who are most engaged with these systems are usually people who like games and like being taken on the wings of imagination to other lands and other places. The level of intensity needs to match your audience. Again, if your brand talks to a casual audience, if it's 35-year-old women that your product is targeting, and these people are not necessarily hardcore gamers, don't go with a hardcore gaming system. It sounds pretty trivial, but there are a lot of pitfalls that you might fall into, and you need to be really careful about what you choose. The user has to be a hero. I mentioned that before. Rewards needs to be contextual. If you create a progress system, if you create ranks or whatever, these ranks and these achievements all need to be contextual to your brand. If your brand is about internationality, create achievements that reward the user for being international, for going to all kinds of places and having a lot of friends from other countries. If your brand is about being homey and local, reward him for doing stuff with his family and doing stuff in his near neighborhood, etc., etc. The last thing is that rewards must be relevant to the audience. I would say if somebody is not connected to the idea that he might, in a virtual world, be a dragon slayer, I would advise against putting dragons in your gamification system. It's again, pretty trivial, but you need to be really specific about it, because at the same time, you do need to create achievements and ranks and badges that are really going to drive your users crazy. They're going to be beautiful, and people will just want to kill to unlock them. The last rule, which is something that I find the need to say every time I have a talk about gamification, there is a perception that I encounter a lot when I talk to advertising agencies. Yeah, let's throw a reward there. Let's do let's do a trip to Disneyland as part of the gamification. So if somebody wins, at the end of the story, they'll get a trip to Disneyland. I hate that. I hate that, and not because I don't like Disneyland. I think it's a great place, but because I think that what happens with games that offer physical reward, physical meaningful reward, is that you have a very small group of players that start working on the reward. I was involved in a project almost 10 years ago where users had to solve logical puzzles by browsing websites and gathering information. All of you probably know chamitzer. So it was sort of a chamitzer, chidat chamitzer, a chamitzer puzzle, and the information, the hints, were in websites by famous brands. And the idea was that people are going to browse these brands, you know, like they do in Chilot Chametzer, when they go around the country and find, you know, hints and make a trip out of it. They would do the same in websites. What happened was, and the reward was 100,000 shekels. This is 1998, I think, or yeah, 1998. On the first week, one user got the reward. Okay? He got the check, he came, there was a ceremony, everybody was happy about it, they wrote about it in the newspapers. On the second week, a second user got the reward. The engagement of the overall population was abysmal. I mean, there were like maybe 2,000 people who actually got engaged with the game because they realized very quickly that unless they're going to invest, you know, 6, 7, 8 hours a day in breaking this riddle, they're not going to get the reward. So they said, okay, I don't care about this. It's not interesting for me, and they left. On the third week, the same guy from the first week got the reward again. He was really good, and that's when they killed the project. So it cost about, I don't know, several hundreds of thousands of dollars to build it. Another 3 cycles of 100,000 shekels rewards, and that was done. I'm bringing this example just to show how engagement is a double-edged sword. You want engagement, but you don't want to create a situation in your game where a small number is doing, you know, 120,000% engagement, and everybody else is like on the 5%. And because of that, the bonus rule is don't do physical rewards. If you decide to do it, I'm not responsible for that. So I can't finish without a good example of what I perceive to be a nice gamification system for a brand, and this is Tabasco Nation. This is a Facebook application. You can look it up. You need to log in and see exactly what's going on there. But Tabasco basically wanted to create a sense of them being an international brand of people who love food and are passionate about what they can combine Tabasco sauce with. Okay, and they have the basic action is conversing with other players about what you can eat Tabasco with. This is the basic mechanic of the game. They have various other mechanics in the game, like the tournament that they created, you can see it here, which is basically what is the best food that you can eat with Tabasco. And they created it, you know, just like a knockout tournament when people vote, with people voting for each of these combinations and eventually getting to the final phase. And they had a high score of people that were most engaged with the application and did the most actions and published the most stuff. They have, I don't know how well you see it, but you can sort of create your own avatar, which is wrapped with peppers and Tabasco elements. And you know, the Tabasco Nation itself is a metaphor, not very much different than Marlboro Country. I mean, they created this virtual domain called Tabasco Nation, where all people love Tabasco. Now, they also created, I'm just going to show that, they also created an amazing set of badges that you can collect. And you can see some of them, Hungry Health Nut, because they created some actions that are requiring the users to engage with health so that you don't get over fat. They don't want to be perceived as, a condiment for junk food. And of course, you know, because Tabasco is hot, there's a lot of red here. There's something like you dropped the bomb, and various other elements that indicate, you know, that Tabasco at the end of the day is a very hot sauce. Now, despite the fact that this is a very good example, I personally think they went a little bit too far with their metaphor here. I think Tabasco Nation is not a place that many people would like to live in and spend hours and days of their life in. I think in a situation like this, what probably happened is that the advertising agency kept pushing on the brand and brand identity and more colors and more, and the game designers or whoever built this system was simply not strong enough to tell them, guys, listen, if you don't want to make a great game out of it, then you're going to get a wonderful story in your advertising magazine and maybe even a reward at the end of the year, but not necessarily a lot of engagement from users. I don't know, because this is it's already months since this came out. It got a lot of press. I haven't seen amazing stories about engagement with users, but I do encourage you to look at this example and trust your instincts and feel in your stomach if this is something which is too much branding or just a little bit branding. And when you see the IDF example that will be presented later, this is how it's done. And they're going to talk about this later. This is it for me. And do we have time for questions?
We're going to do questions afterwards.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Questions
Doron.
afterwards. Thank you very much.